Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you as always for stopping by. Let me start with, I really had a fascinating interview with a gentleman called Robert Amsterdam. He is the lawyer who is representing Bobby Wine, the Ugandan musician turned politician who's run foul of President Museveni. But this discussion covered Putin, he defended Khodorkovsky, Xi JinPing, President Trump, and also in passing mentioned that he always advises his clients never to settle transactions in dollars. And that was an interesting detail and something we'll be looking to publish later on today. Very interesting indeed. Macro thoughts, it was indeed a beautiful day for gold. This is a chart from Pinecone Macro. We popped through 1220, but we're back around 1218 at the moment. I am not as bullish as some other ones, but yesterday's price action was certainly interesting. Guess what chart this is? I was doing my EGM Securities update with Calvin. Don't say it's a generic chart. It's actually the S&P 500, but it could have been many other ones. I stick with what I wrote in September 2016, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And I was saying then, if volatility spikes, positions are going to be reduced en masse, or to put it another way, and to borrow the lyrics from the Eagles Hotel California, mirrors on the ceiling, the pink champagne on ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. The last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man. We are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. And I said, what is clear is that we're at the fag end of this party. And as you can see, we've had a massive sell-off in the equity markets. Investors rush to unload US stocks in afternoon trading, with sell orders briefly hitting the highest since the liquidity-driven sell-off in May 2010. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that the markets have been like a patient etherized upon a table for a whole decade. Exactly 10 years ago, this was the FT front page, the first time we called the financial crisis a crash. And in those 10 years, it's as if the world became a Lehman to rescue itself from Lehman. It's been a decade-long breviary. The fear index VIX jumped by another 11% to 25.4, the highest level since February. So that was a big surge, and as I wrote, bubbles are bursting just about everywhere. The crypto bubble was really the worst of capitalism. Some people created no value but got rich. Latecomers were bag holders. False prophets became media stars. Nouriel, crypto is the mother and father of all scams, and blockchain is the most overhyped technology ever, and is no better than a glorified database. And then see Hamath, we are, make no mistake, in the middle of an enormous, multivariate kind of Ponzi scheme. I will not be part of the charade anymore, he said. This was nuts. Is this the crash? Yesterday, more than 1,000 Chinese stocks fell by their maximum daily limit. In September this year, I was saying there are no more quaaludes, and policymakers will no longer be able to pop them. Home thoughts, this is a photograph of early morning in Mombasa. Of course, that's where I was born. And that took me back to Ibn Battuta, who visited East Africa in the spring of 1331. Travelled south along the East African coast from Aden to Mogadishu, Mombasa and Kilwa. He arrived at the island of Mombasa, which he described as a large island with 2 days' journey by sea between it and the land of the Swahili, It has no mainland. Its trees are the banana, the lemon, and the citron. They have fruit which they call jamun, which is similar to the olive, and its jamun stone is like its olive stone, except that it is extremely sweet. There was no grain cultivated at Mombasa. All grain was imported from the Swahili coast. Most of their diet consisted of bananas and fish. The people of Mombasa were Shafi Muslims, a religious people, trustworthy and righteous. Their mosques are made of wood, expertly built. At every door of the mosques there are 1 or 2 wells. The depth of the wells is a cubit or 2. And lovely photograph, I thought. This is what sunrise looks like from the top of Mount Kenya. Indeed, lovely photographs, and I don't feel able to climb it anymore, but my children have. My youngest, I think, is about to. The 2-man crew of a Soyuz rocket are alive after they were forced to make an emergency landing. Political reflections. Prime Minister Trudeau promotes education for girls in his own unique style. That's from Rashid Abdi. The former Prime Minister of Malaysia tells the Financial Times he is unrepentant after being swept from power by a wave of popular outrage at the excesses of his administration. Say anything, won't he? Donald Trump has reportedly tried to fire John Kelly, but failed because the White House Chief of Staff just ignores him. The president wants rid of the former Marine Corps general, but doesn't know who to call to fire him, as Mr. Kelly himself usually carries out his sackings, according to an administration staffer. That's just brilliant. President Trump directly accused Hillary Clinton of engaging in a conspiracy with Russia to affect the 2016 election during a rally in Pennsylvania. And Hillary responded seriously, "You asked Russia to hack me on national television." Turks tell US officials they have audio and video recordings that support the conclusion that Khashoggi was killed. You can hear his voice and the voices of men speaking Arabic, this person said. You can hear how he was interrogated, tortured, and then murdered. For President Trump, who has made Saudi Arabia the fulcrum of his Middle East policy, the possible murder of a Saudi journalist in Turkey is a looming diplomatic crisis. For President Trump, who has made Saudi Arabia the fulcrum of his Middle East policy, the possible murder of a Saudi journalist in Turkey is a looming diplomatic crisis. For Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, it is a personal reckoning. The fate of Khashoggi remains unclear. Well, hardly. Allegations that he was killed on the orders of the royal court have thrown Mr. Kushner's grand bet on Prince Mohammed into doubt. I think there's a big risk that Kushner actually facilitated this. And that's what I think a lot of people will be wondering about, actually. American intelligence agencies have collected communications intercepts of Saudi officials discussing a plan to lure Mr. Khashoggi back to Saudi Arabia from his home in Virginia and then detain him, according to a former senior American official. The official who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss confidential intelligence reports said it was inconceivable that such a plan could be carried out without the approval of the Crown Prince. The American intercepts were first reported by the Washington Post. Lindsey Graham said that if the Saudis were responsible for Khashoggi's death, there would be hell to pay. I've never been more disturbed than I am right now. If this man was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, that would cross every line of normality in the international community. They're used to crossing every line of normality, frankly. I take you back to November 2017, when I wrote last week, after being coached into the early hours by Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, MBS launched his Night of the Long Knives the very next day. And they've obviously been coordinating to a great degree. I still think it's an unprecedented moment in the history of the kingdom, and the most perilous moment for the House of Saud that I can recall. Khashoggi said there were only 2 ways to liberate the Arab world of its corrupt regimes by infiltrating the political system through its institutions or by violently overthrowing the depraved ruling cliques. Said he had long shared bin Laden's view. Saudi Arabia, this is a tweet from Amina Bakr, there will be blood. She's referring to a report. Saudi Arabia, there will be blood. The ambition of modernizing Saudi Arabia appears to be leading the kingdom's leadership down a dark path. As I wrote before, he's paranoid at an existential level, in my view. And then at Bloomberg, asked him, are you leading a Thatcher revolution for Saudi Arabia? He was asked in early 2016. His answer was most certainly, and saying if there's a model that the Saudi leaders following, it's not Thatcher or even Mikhail Gorbachev, it's more a combination of Xi JinPing and Vladimir Putin. Overpromising is an occupational hazard, but MBS hasn't merely under-delivered, he's also departed seriously from the script with the Ritz-Carlton arrests, the Qatar sanctions, the activist clampdown, and now the highly damaging speculation about Khashoggi. Kim Yo-jong strikes again. Kim Jong-un's sister came rushing over with a white envelope with a thumb drive of photos documenting Pompeo's visit with Kim Jong-un. Of course, I wrote about her in February when I said that Kim Jong-un unleashed his secret weapon on the world, that secret weapon being his sister Kim Yo-jong, who evidently bamboozled South Korea's President Moon River. They have given the order from the White House that Maduro be killed, said Venezuela's president. And I've written about them severally. In May 2017, I thought Venezuela was a breaking point. And I was quoting The Edge, there is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. And in August this year, I was talking about how Trump was relishing his financial warfare strategies, Khamenei on the run, Maduro in Venezuela being attacked by remote-controlled drone. And I was saying Z also looks ever so fragile. International markets, the dollar index is just below 95. US 10-year yields rose to 3.18% and oil bounced. Gold down below 1220 after one of its best runs higher in a day. The power of tariffs, China's trade surplus with the US exploded as US companies front-loaded China imports before the latest round of tariffs kick in. That's interesting. I wrote about the tariff war and I asked who blinks first, and I was calling it a chicky run. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 115.80 after popping over 116. Dollar index just below 95. Japanese yen 112.29. Swiss franc 0.9891. The pound 132.13. The Australian dollar is at 0.7117. India rupee 73.825, South Korean won 11.3116, the Rial 378.31, Egyptian pound 17.93, and the Rand continues to firm, last at 14.4558. Dollar index, this is a chart from Pinecone Macro, we're at 94.99. Euro dollar, I think you fade the bounce, anything above 116, and then sell some more if it gets any higher, but I think we're going to parity. Commodity markets, Brent fell below $80 a barrel, almost 4% at one point yesterday before bouncing and rebounding, and is now above $81 a barrel. Emerging markets are having a good opening, up 1.9% as Asian markets recover some of their recent losses. Sub-Saharan Africa, this is from the IMF, external risks threaten Sub-Saharan Africa's steady recovery. They are saying it's not a single story. The past few years have been very difficult for oil exporters such as Angola and Nigeria, following the sharp decline in oil prices in 2014. IMF again, debt vulnerabilities persist, particularly after SSA issuers issued an absolute ton of bonds. Sub-Saharan African countries most affected by the trade war would be the commodity exporters, and those countries, commodity exporters and importers alike, that are more integrated in global markets. Talking about the increased exposure to an unexpected tightening of global financial conditions. Medium-term growth of 4% is too low for Sub-Saharan Africa. The region needs to raise growth to create the additional 20 million jobs per year. Good luck with that. DR Congo is to deploy security forces at Ebola burials. As I said previously, it's all about Ebola's escape velocity. Viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. There have been 200 cases and 125 deaths. That's from WTB Clouds. This is a lovely throwback picture ahead of the much-awaited Ethiopia-Kenya football match. His Majesty with Jomo Kenyatta and Idi Amin, would you believe? Fitch ratings cut Zambia deeper into junk, citing a widening budget gap and a faster than expected rise in debt levels. Kwacha has fallen by almost 16% since the start of September, which makes paying the debt more expensive. Loosening of targets means the government is actually not applying austerity, it's an expansionary fiscal policy stance. Zambia's president, according to Africa Confidential, may have equipped his presidential jet with an anti-missile system which fires lasers at incoming heat-seeking missiles. A defense expert described the installation of such a system on a presidential jet as insane. Government goes on another shopping spree. International banks are reassessing plans for fresh lending to Lusaka. Israel and Zambia are almost ready to sign a new $400 million package for high-tech aviation equipment to be funded with a loan from Israel's Hapoel Bank. The deal is believed to include a new presidential jet. Russia is also set to deliver a Sukhoi SSJ regional jet airliner with a luxury specification suitable for a head of state. Going to Zimbabwe over the weekend, I wrote one domino that has suddenly tipped over is Zimbabwe. And the point I was referring to is that 9.3 billion of Zolars in banks compared to $200 million in reserves. And it is this that has panicked everybody because they know if they all went to get their money, they wouldn't get anything. Many businesses have stopped accepting the local bond notes known here as Zolars or Zimbolars. Black marketeers are now valuing at 4 or even 5 to the US dollar, and theoretically it can go to 0. KFC has closed its local outlets, citing these difficult times. Supermarkets have been rationing some items, and mining companies and other exporters are complaining about a lack of access to foreign exchange reserves. I'm very worried it's going to be just like 2008, or maybe worse. It isn't the tax that's causing the turbulence, as was Craig Chiranda, but the mass realization that what people thought were dollar deposits are electronic entries with questionable value. What is happening in Zimbabwe is a run on a financial system in which people can't withdraw their deposits. Burger King, however, is looking to expand in sub-Saharan Africa, saying that the world's second biggest hamburger chain was significantly underpenetrated in the continent where it had a huge opportunity. Fast food has been a no-brainer for many people, actually. And it's a very interesting article in the FT about Burger King, looking at McDonald's, looking at the different models. We want to do it right, we want to do it in a big way, we want to scale quickly, so we're excited about the potential. South African oil shares down 12.23% this year. It's lost a lot of ground, in part because of 10-cent dollar versus rand. The rand has strengthened to 14.4558, might strengthen some more. When Heinz beats Africa to the branding and packaging punch, something is seriously wrong. This is Heinz now packaging jollof rice. Nigerian oil share down 15.23%. Ghana Stock Exchange up 13.43%. Acacia Mining says employee in Tanzania charged with corruption. They've been in the wars there for a while. Very interesting World Bank Human Capital Index 2018. Nigeria ranked at 152, Angola 147, Uganda 137, Pakistan 134, South Africa 126, Ghana 116, India 115, Bangladesh 106, Morocco 98, Kenya 94, Mauritius 52, top of the heap, Singapore. Kenya's ability to raise more taxes has likely peaked, says the World Bank, given the continuous revenue decline at a time when nominal GDP is growing. The ability to raise more revenue could have plateaued, and significant structural reforms may be needed to reverse this worrying trend. The government is seeking to collect $16.8 billion in the current fiscal year to help narrow the budget deficit to 5.9% of GDP from 6.9%. To do that, the Treasury has introduced measures including an 8% value-added tax on petroleum products and doubled excise levies on mobile money transfers. What is happening right now is that you're increasing taxes on an already compliant population. You can only mine so much, and at some point you will start getting diminishing returns. Kenya is like a Ferrari that's going at 60 kilometers per hour, but is capable of doing 150 an hour. We need to do some structural reforms to get there, said Alan Dennis, a World Bank senior economist. This is what I was writing about in June when I was saying the government should cut taxes and cast the net wider. I said it's now a zero-sum game. In order to get the show back on the road and get back to faster GDP growth, because growth is the silver bullet, we should be cutting taxes and casting the tax net wider. Kenya's strong pickup in economic activity that started in the first half of 2018 is expected to continue in the medium term. World Bank, notwithstanding rising oil prices, the current account deficit narrowed in the first half of 2018. In the year to July 2018, the current account deficit narrowed to 5.3%. Growth in credit to government increased from 8.8% to 20.6% in 2018, while average growth in credit to the private sector rose marginally from 2.7% to 2.8% over the same period. So it's sort of about government borrowing. Tax revenue as a percent of GDP dropped from 18.1% in full year 2013-14 to 17.1% in full year 2016-2017. Looks like it's going to drop to 15.4%. I've always said a sub-Saharan African economist has got to be an accomplished meteorologist because rain is so important to how you read it. And Kenya's boost and pop higher this year has all been rain related. Liberty-backed Kenyan pay TV firm is considering a sale. This is one AG, which has a real blue chip roster of shareholders. Lazard is looking at it. Altice is a shareholder, Helios as well. They're targeting the growing middle class in sub-Saharan Africa, providing broadband services. Nairobi All Shares down 13.77%. NSE 20 is down 23.89% year to date. Let me leave you with a lovely photograph of Lake Nicholson on Mount